Bring this meeting to order. So I'd like to bring the meeting of the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation Orthotics and Prosthetics Advisory Board meeting to order. It is 10:15, and we'll start off with the agenda, which starts with calling the meeting to order, and I've done so. Next is to take roll and make sure that we have quorum. So I am present. Kevin Matthews is present. Sterling Phillips is present. Randall Duncan had informed us earlier that he wasn't going to be present today, so he's absent. Catherine Mize is here. David Aarons is here. And we have a vacant position, so today is the 19th of May. So thank you very much for being here with all this rain. And I apologize for starting 15 minutes late. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. So the minutes for the meeting of February the 18th. Those were sent to us, and hopefully everybody on the advisory board has had a chance to review those. If that has been done, or if everyone reviewed it, do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Any changes? We're all comfortable with what was written in there? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? So moved.
Chair, would you announce the motion in a second? Who made the motion?
Okay, who made the motion to,
Catherine Mize.
Kevin Matthews, second.
all right. Next, is next time, the next item on the agenda will be for the public comment. Did anybody sign up for public comment? No one? Okay. So we'll move on to the next agenda, what's going to be our staff reports. So the first up is going to be for the executive officer, and he is...
That would be me.
Okay.
So, for today, anyway, I want to make that clear.
Okay.
So good morning. Thank you all for slogging through the soup to get here today. We appreciate your dedication to the cause. My name is George Ferry. I'm Director of the Compliance Division. I'm sitting in today for Bill and Brian, who were at the Texas Leadership Forum, getting even smarter. I do want to just kind of mention, as we get started here, that there may be, the agenda has some listings for basically all the divisions, and there may or may not be reports from all divisions, but you can go ahead and call those up as we get to them. So I'll go through the kind of the items. I had a few notes here to make sure I cover everything. So the overview, I've already kind of told you what's going on, where our executive is today. So I'll move to the update and discussion regarding the transfer of the programs. Now, if you looked on your webpage on our website, you'll see a schedule of kind of things that are happening, most of which the dates have already passed and are in progress, particularly the conversion. We're working fast and furious on that. We're also have begun hiring positions, filling positions, and I'll touch a little bit on the compliance division hiring when I get to my report. We have started sending staff, particularly licensing staff, over to DSHS to both learn their system and to help out too, because they're a little shorthanded. Dee Dee will cover actually more details on that, our Director of Licensing, when we get to that report. We have started some of the work group meetings, specifically the enforcement work group, and you'll see the product of that work group and those individuals of you who participated in that particular exercise. That's also an agenda item that you'll be asked to discuss. Our main focus, though, right now, obviously, is getting everything in place so we can make a seamless transition on October 3rd. That will be the date that the program officially transfers from DSHS to TDLR. Up to September 30th, anyone having any licensing issues they need to deal with will be dealing with DSHS. And when the sun rises on October 3rd, you'll be part of the TDLR family officially. I will say that we've been kind of blessed on this. We have had a little bit more time to work on this. Lots of times the legislature will send us a program and say, you know, the bill passes sometime in the middle of May and we're expected to have everything up and running by September 1. So we were able to have a little more time and actually get the advisory board appointed, and y'all have had a chance to look over the rules and help us reformat them. And there'll be more work to do on that going forward, obviously, with the work groups. Okay, so we talked about, I mentioned the enforcement group, and the big thing that they've been working on right now is part of the licensing process, essentially, and that is developing criminal conviction guidelines. Another thing that we're already kind of started work on is the subject of inspections of facilities. We will be, what we discussed is inspecting all the facilities. Now, there'll probably be some allowance for those who have already had ABC visit them, the board accreditation, certification, excuse me. And we'll actually be meeting with some of the staff at ABC here soon, just to kind of get an idea of what they do and give us a better idea of what kind of things maybe we should be looking at, help us develop checklists and all that good stuff. But I'm stealing from the field operations report here, so I won't go into too much detail. The more, as we go forward, there will obviously be more profound issues we'll be dealing with, like standards of care and that sort of thing. That hard work will probably start after October 3rd. We generally don't do a lot of advisory board meetings during the session, which, by the way, starts in January, this coming January, because we have so much going on, and lots of times there might be proposed changes to the law going through in the form of bills. So we'll want to kind of wait and see what happens with that stuff, and if there are changes to the law, we have to do rule changes and all that good stuff. That's kind of the gist of where we're at on the transition. We have already begun a lot of work on converting the software for our use. We've hired staff members in our IT section that is their main focus, is getting that converted so that we can start, we'll be ready to just start right in on October 3rd. Now I'll move on to the next item, strategic planning, and I'll start by asking, how many of y'all had an opportunity to attend one of our brainstorming sessions? Good. So you kind of got an idea of how we do strategic planning. We do involve everybody. That includes license holders, the public, our own staff. We do internal sessions. And we gather comments to get ideas of things, maybe for services that we provide. Are we providing the services you need? Are we doing it in the way that's helpful to you? We ask 4 questions in each one of these sessions. What are we doing well? What can we do better? If you could be king or queen for a day, what one thing would you change? And then we ask what's happening in the future that we need to be aware of. Those comments were posted today on our website. If you go to the link on the main page about strategic planning, you'll see where we listed all the comments that we received from the external sessions. So if you need a little late night reading, you can want to go through all those, you're more than welcome. We are in the process as part of our strategic planning of looking at those kind of items, looking at things that, in fact, we were instructed in our strategic plan to look for things that are impediments or redundancies in law. There may be some things like dates that need to be updated, that sort of thing. For example, we may need to look at the temporary license requirement in your law, the 1996. Does that need to be updated, or is that fine the way it is? I think there were other items just about making the processes easier that people mentioned in their comments. So we're in the process of going through all those comments and trying to prioritize, what things do we really need to focus on and what things maybe we need to change or try to change in the next legislative session. And I will mention one other thing too, since I've talked about the session and about what we post on our websites. As we go through the session, we do post bills that relate to our programs on our website. We just put them out there so you all see what's coming, the status of the bill, kind of, it's scheduled for a hearing this day or that day. So you have an idea of, are there any bills currently going through the legislature that affect our program? So that is a service we do provide to our licensees, and hopefully you'll be able to take a look at that and kind of you can impress your friends at parties and tell them exactly, what's going on in the legislature with your program and all that good stuff. So, and the other thing, personnel changes. We've had, obviously we have some personnel changes that, just hiring, as I said, hiring people to administer the programs. And I'm in the process of hiring some folks. I'll tell you a little bit about that in my report. But some of the larger changes, you may have heard that our current executive director, William Kuntz, is retiring at the end of August. He will be missed. We're happy for him. Retirement sounds very inviting. But I know, Bill likes to thrill the chase. So I know he's going to miss it. He's going to miss us, and we'll probably see him from time to time, I suspect. But the commission accepted that retirement yesterday in their meeting. In that meeting, they also appointed Mr. Brian Francis, as our new executive director starting September 1. So we're all excited, obviously, about Brian being our leader going forward. It'll provide some continuity. Brian's been very involved in the transition for these programs and is very knowledgeable of all the programs, so it's going to help to have him hopefully it'll be as seamless as the transition itself will be when we get into that. We also have, we're saying goodbye to a couple of our longtime commissioners, Luann Morgan and Fred Moses, and we do appreciate, I'm going to miss them. We appreciate their service. They've also the governor has appointed 2 new commissioners, Helen Collier and Rick Figueroa. They probably will be attending our next commission meeting, but we're looking forward to working with Mr. Collier and Ms. Collier and Mr. Figueroa. So that's another change for us. And I believe I've gotten to the bottom of my notes, so I'm taking that as a sign that my report's done. Do y'all have any questions of the executive office that I might be able to answer for you? Did I miss anything?
I think you got everything.
Okay, good, thank you.
You had mentioned that during session, there's not advisory. Do I understand it correctly, that you don't have?
It's not a prohibition, but we have so much stuff going on, and there may be something happening in the session that actually affects something you may be talking about that we don't usually schedule a lot of them, let's put it that way.
Okay.
It's not to say that, no, we don't do any. I don't want to give that impression, but we don't do a lot of them.
Okay.
And this is Mary Winston. During that time, there may be bills that come up that will affect you. We keep an eye on all of those bills. We follow it very closely. We don't want to have you come in and look at something that's going to change the next time they are in session the next day.
Okay.
So we may limit that depending on what goes on. So that's why it'll be more limited during that time period. Now, after that, we may take off running, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
And we have no control over that. But that's why it's more limited during that time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, probably, particularly if there's something that affects your program, then after the session during the summer, you may be here a lot, because we may have rules that have to be changed by September 1 or something like that. So.
And all of our bills, excuse me, George, Mary Winston again, are on the webpage. We will have them on our webpage for anyone to see, and if you have a question or comment, please contact me, us. We are following them, but we'll keep you in the loop as much as possible, and we try to keep the public in the loop as much as possible.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, we can move on to see if there's a report from the Compliance Division.
And there is.
There is? Okay.
It's me again. I'm not doing the whole meeting, by the way. So.
Okay, so just keep looking.
I did want to, I think you should have a copy of the compliance report there, and I do want to mention, and I'm going to touch a little bit after this about the organization in the compliance division for these programs, but I have hired a manager for the new health professions section in the compliance division. It's Mr. Stephen Mills, who is currently with DSHS, and he will be starting sometime in June. Excited about having Stephen. I know he's very knowledgeable and a very easy person to work with, and I look forward to having him as one of what will be 3 section managers in the compliance division. And that being said, we also have 5 other positions that we will be filling for the DSHS programs that are coming over. So basically, the compliance division, as I think, if you all recall, if you harken back to the training that we did, the compliance division is, we're in a support role, particularly as technical experts and subject matter experts. We help provide some input on rule proposals, make reports at advisory board meetings, answer questions daily, the more technical questions. So as the organization that we've set up in the compliance division for these programs is we will have 5 other individuals who will kind of split the programs between them. And I can't tell you right now who will be the person assigned your program, but once we get them hired. And those folks will probably start October 1st or thereabouts, or maybe shortly before, because we don't want to, obviously, it's a very good chance that some of the folks that are currently doing this job at DSHS will be folks that we hire to fill those positions. Now, we had originally, we're going to post the positions a little sooner, but we kind of held back a little bit, so we will be posting the vacancies for those positions here sometime pretty soon. But that's kind of, because I think some people had some questions about the organization and the role of the compliance division. I didn't want to touch on that. So y'all have any questions about the compliance report?
As you hire those positions, Catherine Mize,
Yes.
as you hire those positions, how are they going to be trained in the subject matter of the area that they're going to cover? For instance, O&P,
Yeah.
whoever's assigned to that.
Okay. Well, obviously, they're going to be spending a lot of time reading the law and the rules over and over again. But also in identifying and perhaps talking to members of this board too, trying to make sure that they understand the issues. It will be something that, and obviously this board, this committee provides the expertise that we need, particularly for rules and that sort of thing. But these persons will basically be the in-house advisory. They will be providing, learning and providing that expertise. Now, if you have any suggestions of things they might do to help become expert, we're open to suggestions.
Yeah, one of the things that hits me immediately is they need to spend time in a clinic.
And very likely will, yes. No, we're going to send someone from the compliance division along with the ABC to visit a clinic and get an idea. But that's something we absolutely do. You know, where we can't, you know, some of our other programs, like we have an AC contractor on staff who helps with the AC program, has done the job. 2 electricians, they've done the job. We may not have that necessarily, but we will have someone who is immersed in that program, and maybe another one, to understand it, because that's the thing. As a subject matter experts, we need to, it's not just quoting you back law and rules, it's actually having a deeper understanding of the profession, so that we understand the issues, so that we can bring forward, like I said, rule changes. Maybe, you know, this is a real problem for the profession. Maybe we need to look at this rule and reevaluate it and propose a change. And we would get with our general counsel office and work in those changes like that. So.
And Ms. Mary Winston, we've already had staff out, some of our field op staff out, to pay some visits, to see, Mr. Phillips is nodding, to see a real world situation for your program. And we will continue to do that. And staff we also, in hiring Stephen, he has years and I'll say oodles and oodles of experience in the various programs. And he's not going to be the only one that, you know, maybe we spirit away who has some experience that can really help with the situation. But definitely we will continue spending time and learning. And that's the beautiful part of not getting our money on time, that we've had extra time to learn before we actually have to push forward.
Yeah, and I can give you an example of a program that we got a few years back, used auto part recyclers, excuse me. We actually visited used auto part recyclers and saw how they did their business and asked them questions and had them show us their paperwork and show us their operation and that kind of thing. So we had, again, it's one thing just reading words on paper, but actually seeing how things work is going to make a difference in the understanding that we have of the profession. So hope that helps.
Good.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for compliance? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on the agenda is going to be the Education and Examination Division. Do we have anybody that's going to report on that? Yep.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. As you guys know, the first meeting we had, is it on?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
The first meeting we had, it was about to kind of get to know us, who we are and how we play a role in your lives and your industry. And we oversee a lot of the education, pre-education for some of the industries, such as midwives. And we have continuing education and examinations as well that we offer for some of the industries that will require an exam component prior to obtaining a license. In your case, most of your exams are not a local exam or a state exam. So what you'll see and what our division will touch for you guys will be the CE component and the jurisprudence exam. We are currently working on how we're going to continue to administer that exam, the jurisprudence, and how we're going to capture and conduct the CE portion of that. No fear, we're not going to do anything, we're not going to hit the beehive with a bat. Hopefully when the programs come over, we're going to try to continue what has been done. Of course, as George and others and Mary's was saying, we're streamlining some of the process. We're understanding how it works at DSHS with the continuing education. So we'll tweak things and kind of keep that same model, but you'll see some improvements and some changes. And of course, with your opinion and your feedback, we will get there when we make those rule changes. I've hired 2 new individuals, one of them from DSHS. His name is Jerry Gonzalez. He's sitting right over there. And he comes from the massage therapy program. So he's going to be valuable in a couple of years for us. But nevertheless, he's very, don't mistake him, he's very valuable right now. Because what we're going to utilize Jerry as is that institutional knowledge of knowing the Versa program that they currently use.
Good catch.
Nice recovery.
You know how he knows, hey, he knows the Versa program, and he's going to give us that knowledge, that institutional knowledge on how that would interact and how we do business here, how business is being done there. So we got him early prior to that October 3rd. And we're rapidly going to put him to work. We already have some of our T guys pointing fingers at him. Hey, I need to talk to you. So he's going to be really, really an asset for us. And at the end of the day, you're going to see some of that knowledge from him. Although he's massage therapy, where I'm getting at is it's still going to help you guys. And the next person we also hired was Frances Mendieta Pringle, and she's sitting right over there. And she's going to be dealing with a lot of the examination component. So she'll be a part of how we're going to, in the future, continue to administer that jurisprudence exam. And really, that's all I have for you guys. If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them.
No, thank you very much, Ray. Appreciate it. Next would be the Enforcement Division. Do we have somebody to report?
Actually, as you know, Ms. Mojica, Mary Winston, we have these as placeholders. Ray was gracious enough to give us a report. He has some new hires he wanted to discuss their value in a couple of years, so we thank him for giving that. The Enforcement Division doesn't have anything new. We are not yet enforcing. So we don't have statistics that we can get to you today.
Okay.
We're here for questions, and I say we because I still refer to myself as enforcement.
Ah.
But, so we are here for questions if you have them.
Okay.
But if not, you will hear from the Director of Enforcement quite shortly related to criminal conviction guidelines.
Okay.
So
Any-
I have a question. As enforcement, as October 3rd gets closer and closer, the cases that have already been filed, complaints, and perhaps have been opened as cases, what's the handoff going to look like?
Don't go away.
This is Virginia Fields with me. She's one of the prosecutors in the Enforcement Division, and on an ongoing basis, she's going to be the person who presents the staff report to this advisory board. I am Christina Kaiser. I'm the director of the Enforcement Division. When we have already met with folks at DSHS several times to talk about the handoff of pending cases. Essentially, any case that's pending at DSHS on the day of the transfer of authority, we will step into the shoes and assume that case in the same stature or posture that it's in at that time. So if it is set for hearing, it becomes our case that is set for hearing on the SOA docket. As a practical matter, when we receive whatever pending cases there are from DSHS, we will incorporate those into our electronic case file system. It's called Legal Files. I believe at DSHS the cases are mostly hard copy files, so we will incorporate them into our electronic case file system, and we will open them and give them a new case number that is consistent with our numbering system. But aside from that, we essentially step into the case in the same posture that it was in at DSHS.
Okay. Well, so then let me ask a little bit more specific question. Let's say a case has already been opened and it's been in progress, and the existing TBOP board members have looked at it, discussed it, made some initial decisions. Perhaps they tabled it for whatever reason, more information needed to be gathered, et cetera. Will there be any conversations with those board members as to what their thoughts were or where they were going
There
with
will
that
be,
case at the time?
there will be, to the extent we feel that's needed. As you know, going forward, the reliance upon experts from the advisory board or experts more generally from the industry is going to be a little bit different. We will need the advisory board's members to be expert witnesses for us if we need to go forward with the case. However, the more general role that the advisory or that the independent board has played in the past of deciding the pathway that an enforcement case is going to take, that's not going to be part of the process anymore. That discretionary, do we go forward or not decision is going to rest with the agency. And of course, we're going to need to be informed by our experts to be able to evaluate the evidence that's in front of us. But after we get that expert opinion and we match that evidence up with the law, then the decision of what we do with the case rests with us.
Okay. And that expert opinion is going to come either from the advisory board or a group of experts in the field that you guys have designated?
We're still working on procedures, and that will be part of the discussion that happens at future enforcement work group meetings to sort of nail down what are the pool of potential experts out there. Because if you've ever been involved in an enforcement case or any kind of legal case that involved an expert witness, you know certain experts will be conflicted out of certain cases. And so it might be a rare circumstance, but it could happen that every person on the advisory board is conflicted out because of a connection with the respondent or with some circumstance in the case. So in that instance, we're going to need a bigger pool than just the advisory boards, but that's all part of what we want the work group to help us figure out.
Okay.
Because you know this industry, and you know what those resources are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for
Any other questions?
us? Come on, give Virginia one.
Now, I'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the licensing division.
Good Good morning, I'm Dee Dee McEachern, Director of Licensing, and I bring with me Leonard Rivas, who is the new manager of the Health Professions team. He comes from Department of State Health Services with 22 years of experience in licensing there. So, we did good. What I want to talk to you about is just basically what we've been doing so far. So on April 28th, we had a group of 8 people go over for initial training of the licensing system. And we're starting this week, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, we're continuing to go over. There's groups of 5 people, and Leonard and I are 2 of them, who go over and are learning their license process and actually processing license applications. That helps us to learn the system, and it also helps them catch up on backlog. So it's a twofold benefit there. So it also will help us as we're folding in the new licensing system to TDLR for what tweaks we can make to make it a little more efficient on processes as we're going. So that's about it. We've got Leonard and I are going to be doing some more hiring we've got going on throughout the summer. So what TDLR's planned to do is he's going to have a team initially of 4 more people. But what we're planning on doing is we're posting those jobs now, and we're going to interview and hire for those jobs now, but they don't start until October 3rd. So they will stay where they are doing those jobs. They'll just know that they have a job. So that's the logic of why we're doing all that part now. And that's going to be the same across the agency. A few key people have started now that are going to be helping in the hiring process, but for the most part, and the majority of the folks will stay where they are until October.
Okay.
Any questions for Leonard?
I think we're set.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Next on the agenda will be the Field Operations Division.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
board members. Is it on? I can't even hear. We have a few things to cover. I know George touched on it briefly. I'm sorry, Fernando Reyes, Field Operations Liaison. We have a few things to cover. Right now, we're in the process of checking facilities, reviewing them, how they do their surveys, things like that, as far as field operations goes. We're preparing inspections for orthotists and prosthetists facilities. Through ABC, we've made contacts with them, and we'll be following up with those next week. We've already visited one facility. Our division director, along with Lance Carolyn and David Hale, visited a facility up in Lubbock. They did a walkthrough and everything else. So right now we're in the learning phase. So we're getting processes together and things like that. New technology, we're working with IS and networking as we continue to search for an e-inspection. That's our process right now. We want to move towards getting our e-inspection, and I know that DSHS is bringing over a Versa system. So we haven't looked at that quite yet, but we're in the process of doing that as well. We don't have much new hires right now. Our division director, Tanya Guthrow, is going through a new manager interviews up in Fort Worth right now. She was unable to attend today, so she's scheduling those interviews as well. And we also have a facilitator position that we'll be hiring for in our division. Okay. I think that's pretty much what we have under our belt. If you have any questions?
I do.
Okay,
Kelly.
go ahead.
Are you all consulting with anybody beyond ABC on your facility inspections?
Right now, as of now, no, we're not. We are open to that. I think that we need to make more contacts, and also through the board as well. We're going through people that we can make contact with to schedule those inspections with the other accreditation company.
Well, and maybe somebody up here can help me out, because I just realized BOC was another
Right.
licensing and credentialing agency. They have just announced that they're going to no longer credential orthotists and prosthetists.
Okay.
The transition date happens this summer, August 1st,
I think so. Yeah.
perhaps, is when they're going to stop. What I don't know is if they're going to still do facilities.
Yeah, they are.
They are.
They are still
They
doing
are.
facilities?
Yeah,
I
they're
know
gonna-
they're
they're
still
gonna-
doing assistance, but,
They're gonna keep doing facility accreditation, inspections. They're just no longer licensing practitioners.
okay,
Okay.
Okay.
all right. No, I'm happy with ABC, I just wasn't sure about where BOC stood, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't haven't spoken with anybody else from BOC. Our contacts have been mainly with ABC.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Uh-huh. Next will be the Department of State Health Services. Is there a report?
Yvonne Feinleib, Department of State Health Services, Professional Licensing and Certification. I don't have a specific report. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to let you know that TDLR staff are coming to our SOA hearings. We've had a couple of SOA hearings for this profession. They are continuing to talk to us about various issues and questions, so there's good collaboration going on. And Stephen Mills, who's the new manager, used to be my boss. He's very experienced. He knows a ton about these programs, and he's very comfortable learning more about them. He's got a lot of capacity. He's been chief of staff for our assistant commissioner, so he's been in a high-up position where he's been involved with legislative affairs. So I think you can be real confident that they're on a good path with their hiring for health professions. I just want to say that. Also, Jerry Gonzalez used to do the O&P facility inspections for that brief period where we got to have them, so he does have some additional expertise. Anything else?
I noticed that the website was down. I wasn't able to get any information on the upcoming meeting. I called and was on hold forever, and then they just hung up. I called again and was on hold a long time. I asked a question, and she said, well, let me ask someone, because she didn't know anything about O&P. And I was on hold another 5 minutes, and I finally had to give up. Are y'all really understaffed over there? Is it really?
We have some staffing challenges. We have a phone system that is shared among multiple programs, so it can get overloaded by another profession. That's why there are sometimes the holds. You're welcome to call me directly. Unfortunately, our website is not currently available in its usual form. What we have right now, they're calling streamlined, and they have a timeline to get a full site up again. They're putting up some pages temporarily, so you can click on licenses and regulation and get to some of the stuff like the jurisprudence exam and the online system. That's all still fine. But if you can't find something you need, email the board's email box, right? onp@dshs.state.tx.us. Email me directly, call me. I will email you any forms you need. And hopefully we will have our full site up soon. But right now we're just having to work around that challenge.
Do you have any idea when soon is? Because I've had people asking me for applications to apply for a license because they can't get anything.
Forward them to me. I will email them everything. I don't know anything officially. I've heard things that it should be up, but I can't speak to it because it's not anything official. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we're all dealing with that. They're trying to get some temporary pages up with our forms and everything, but it's taking some time.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Yes,
Thank you very
This
much.
is
Yvonne, yes.
why we have loved working with and pilfering from DSHS. Thank you.
And we'll continue to do so.
Thank you very much. The next agenda item is going to be, we're on F, discussion and possible action to recommend approval of the criminal conviction guidelines.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, board
morning.
members. I'm Christina Kaiser, the Director of the Enforcement Division here at TDLR. With me is Chris Russey, who is officially titled the Research and Analytics Specialist for the Enforcement Division. Chris does a lot of the actual heavy lifting that goes into the development of the criminal conviction guidelines, and he is also the person who produces the reports that will be presented in the staff report portion of these advisory boards. So you'll be very acquainted with Chris as you go forward. At agenda item F, you have before you a draft of criminal conviction guidelines for this program. The guidelines are used by the agency in determining individuals whose license, who we may seek to deny a license or revoke a license that they already have due to the person's criminal history. These guidelines that you have in front of you were developed by the enforcement work group of this advisory board in consultation with agency staff that included myself, Chris, and Bob Rennick, who is one of our prosecuting attorneys who handles the criminal conviction cases. If you have had a chance to watch any of our commission meetings, you have probably seen Bob featured prominently at those meetings. In those work group meetings, or in the one work group meeting that we held, the work group members from the advisory board helped us to understand the settings in which orthotists and prosthetists do their work. They helped us understand the types of patients who are served and the nature of their contact with those patients. They also helped us through a lot of heavy conversation and really interesting discussions narrow down the types of crimes that should be a possible basis for denying someone a license. The one meeting we held that was actually a formal meeting was on March 14th. Some folks attended in person, some by conference call, and then afterward we narrowed down and finalized the document just through exchange of emails. It was a very efficient process, I thought. The work group members from this advisory board are Kevin Matthews, Catherine Mize, and Randy Duncan. At the end of this presentation today, ultimately what we're going to be asking you to do is recommend that the commission approve these criminal conviction guidelines for this program. Let me take a few minutes and just tell you a little about the criminal conviction review process at TDLR. I'm going to try to keep it short, but I am happy to answer any questions that you have because I really want you to understand the context in which these guidelines are used. Every individual who applies for a license at TDLR is subject to a criminal background check. The majority of the criminal background checks are conducted through DPS, the Department of Public Safety. Some of them are conducted at the national level through the use of fingerprints. The applicants are submitted for the criminal background check by our licensing division, and the results of the criminal background checks are then returned to the agency to the licensing division. The licensing division are the folks who first use the criminal conviction guidelines in our process. There's a team in the licensing division who, that's their job. They review the criminal history results that come back with reference to our criminal conviction guidelines, and they identify any applicant who has a conviction or a deferred adjudication that may fall within the categories that are in the criminal conviction guidelines. If they don't see any of that on the person's criminal history, they clear them for licensing and the person gets on down the road. If they find someone who does have a history that may be cause for concern, then they will kick that applicant over to us, to the enforcement division. At that point, we do a second initial screening of the person's criminal history with reference to the criminal conviction guidelines, and that's done by Bob Rennick and another lawyer in our division, Ken Sharp. So the lawyers do a second screening. They're immediately applying the criminal conviction guidelines. If they are convinced that the person has a conviction or a deferred adjudication that may be a basis for denying the person a license, then they will open the case for investigation and have an investigator gather more detailed information. Typically that's going to include the court records. It might include police records associated with the crime and the investigation of the crime. It might include contacts with parole officers or probation officers if the applicant is under some sort of review. It will involve contact with the applicant himself, asking him to submit, if he has people that would offer letters of recommendation for him, we certainly want to see those. So after an investigation is complete, the lawyer, the prosecutor, makes the ultimate decision of whether or not we're going to seek to deny or revoke someone's license. I've been saying may throughout this presentation, and I want to really stress that. This is a case-by-case analysis that happens. Nothing that we put in these guidelines is an absolute drop-dead, if you've got this conviction, you don't get a license. That's not the way our process works. The crime that the person was convicted of is only part of the analysis. We also are required under the law. We also look at the person's essentially what they've done since they committed the crime. You know, if they went to prison, you know, how did they act in prison? How long have they been out of prison? What have they been doing with themselves since they got out of prison? And that's often the more important evidence in the case, actually, than what the crime was. So I want to stress that very much of a case-by-case analysis that happens. If we do seek to deny or revoke someone's license due to their criminal history, the person has the full opportunity for due process. They have the right to request a hearing on that matter before the State Office of Administrative Hearings. If they go that route, the case is ultimately decided by our commission, the 7-member body that's appointed by the governor that controls our agency. After a decision by the commission, the person has further rights to judicial review, so they can continue to appeal the matter up to the district courts if they choose to do that. That's another thing that I wanted to stress about the process is I don't want to leave you with the impression that the Enforcement Division is the ultimate decision maker and it goes no further than us, because it most certainly does. On every one of our commission meeting agendas, you will see criminal background cases where folks have chosen to take advantage of that full due process that's available to them. So, are there any questions about that in general before I talk about the law a little bit? Okay. The law that we rely on primarily in pursuing the criminal background cases is Chapter 53 of the Occupations Code. And this, the provision, the most important provision there is Section 53.021A of that law. And it states that the agency may suspend or revoke or deny, and again, I use the word may, suspend, revoke, or deny a license to a person who has been convicted of, and then it lists 4 categories of stuff. The first category is the one that we rely on the most often in TDLR's process, and that category is crimes that directly relate to the duties and responsibilities of the licensed occupation. That directly relates language is the whole point of why we're here today, so try to remember that. The other categories that are there, we also rely on these, but normally we find that if something is in one of these other categories, it's also going to fall into the directly related category, which means it's also going to be reflected in these criminal conviction guidelines. So these are important, and we will rely on them, but not to the exclusion of the directly related category. The other categories listed there are crimes that were committed less than 5 years before the date of the application, crimes listed in Section 3G, Article 4212 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. And these are the big daddy types of crimes like murder, capital murder, indecency with a child, aggravated sexual assault, etc. Those are things that, as we discussed, they will typically be directly related anyway. The fourth category is sexually violent offenses as defined in the Code of Criminal Procedure. These, again, are a lot of those same things: indecency with a child, aggravated sexual assault, aggravated kidnapping committed with the intent to violate the victim sexually, things like that. I think the legislature added those additional categories. I think that was their way of saying, we think these crimes are bad enough that the agency should not have to go through the analysis of determining whether they're directly related to the industry or the occupation. But we kind of, in going through that analysis, we find that anyway, that they almost always are directly related. So I said the directly related language in that first provision, the first set of language that allows us to suspend or revoke or deny someone a license, crimes that directly relate to the duties and responsibilities of the licensed occupation. The directly relates language is the reason why we've created the criminal conviction guidelines that are in front of you today for consideration. The guidelines show the categories of crimes that we believe are directly related to this occupation. Does that make sense? The guidelines are intended to put the industry on notice, put would-be applicants and just the public more generally to make all of those folks aware of the crimes that we consider important. We also have to produce the criminal conviction guidelines because we're required to in the law. Chapter 53 has a section in there that requires us to issue the guidelines that state the crimes that we believe are directly related. So that's why we're here. So the document that's in front of you, I'd like to just walk through the categories and kind of share with you what our thinking was at any point along the way that you have questions, please shout them out. And, you know, between myself and the work group members who participated in those meetings, hopefully we'll be able to answer any of the questions that you have. When you look at the guidelines, you'll see that they're laid out in terms of categories. We have learned through trial and error that if you try to list specifically every crime that you want to be concerned about, that's going to be a fool's errand, because from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, courts will use very different words to describe the crimes. And that includes from state to state. That also includes from county to county within the state of Texas, and that also includes from one court to another within the same county. So we kind of figured out that's not the way to do this. So we decided to go with categories of crimes that are stated more broadly. So you'll see that the categories include things like crimes against the person, such as homicide, kidnapping, and assault, crimes involving prohibited sexual conduct, and so forth. Under each category in the criminal conviction guidelines, we have reasons listed there. And these reasons are our effort to explain why we think these crimes are directly related. You will see a lot of repetitiveness in the reasons. For example, the reason number 1, I think, is the same under every one of them. Licensees interact with adults, the elderly, the disabled, and children in a medical provider-patient role. Persons who have a history of committing such crimes would pose a danger to the patients or others. So that was the result of that discussion, you know, that I told you about earlier, where we talked about the settings in which orthotists and prosthetists work and the sorts of patients they serve. So just generally, any of the crimes that we've categorized here, we think just the nature of that work and the nature of that setting is going to put the patients potentially at danger if a person has this kind of a criminal history. So that one's going to be the same on every one. I'm not going to repeat it to you on every one. The second reason under the first category, these occupations involve close proximity to and physical contact with patients and their caregivers, family, and friends, not only in residences and also in private offices. So again, talking about the setting where and the types of folks that come into contact. And finally, the occupation would provide persons with this type of criminal history the opportunity to engage in further similar conduct. That one also is going to be largely repeated through there. That's kind of an overarching thought process that applies to a lot of the analysis in the criminal history world. Is the person going to have the opportunity to engage in further similar conduct? So under crimes involving prohibited sexual conduct, the second category, we have largely the same reasons. Again, we talk about in number 2, the close proximity to and physical contact with the clients as well as other people, their caregivers, family, friends, and so forth. And the private nature of the setting. Under crimes involving children, the elderly, or the disabled as victims, we included this category because of the sort of vulnerable nature of some of the patients that are served. Again, we use the same reasons there about the setting and the close proximity to and the private nature of the settings that people work in. Crimes against property, such as theft or burglary. We talked about this one a lot before we finally decided that it's a good idea to include it, because in those semi-private settings or those when someone's working in a person's home, they will have access to the property of the patients as well as their caregivers and anybody else who's in the house. And so this occupation would therefore provide the person the opportunity to commit theft again if they chose to do that. That's shown in reason number 3 listed there. Licensees would have access to the property. Crimes involving fraud or deceptive trade practices. This was another one that we talked about for a really long time. Ultimately, we decided kind of the same thought process as previously in those sort of private settings. You will have access to people's property. But also, we talked about the fact that licensees in this program are potentially involved in billing, like billing of their clients or patients, filing of insurance claims, perhaps filing documents that are associated with Medicare type of payment. So that presents an opportunity to engage in further fraudulent type behavior if the person is so inclined to do that. The last page are two categories of drug-related crimes. And these actually were not, we didn't even bring these when we first met with the work group. We didn't even bring these as a suggestion, but as a result of discussions with the work group, we decided that we should go ahead and include these. There are basically two categories of drug-related crimes here. The first category are the, what I'll loosely term the drug dealer type of crimes. Possession with intent to deliver, with intent to distribute, or actual delivery or distribution or manufacture of drugs. And then the second category is crimes that involve being under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And we talked about those concepts for a long time before we kind of figured out that we needed to separate them into two separate concepts, and then it was a lot easier to represent this. The first category, what I term as the drug dealer categories, the thinking there, again, is very similar. The semi-private settings, the types of clients or patients who are served. We included under number 3 there, persons who have a history of drug possession or drug dealing could potentially have drugs in their system that would make them a danger to the clients or others, or to the patients, excuse me. And the opportunity to engage in further similar conduct. Something I wanted to offer to you as possibly something we could add is in other work groups with other DSHS programs, after we met with this group, we came up with some language that I think is a little bit more on point with what we're really concerned about. This is just an example that we used in another one. Children and adult clients who use pain medications or other medications are potentially vulnerable to someone who may wish to illegally sell or otherwise distribute drugs, or enlist the aid of the client, or in your world, the patient, in obtaining drugs for them. If this concept is, if you feel like this is appropriate for your industry, I would offer that as maybe something to add here, because I think it's more specific to the concern about drug dealing. What do you think?
Would it be added as a reason?
Yeah, we would add it as one of the listed items. I would probably add it as number 3, and then that number 3 that's there would push down to 4. Are there any thoughts?
I don't have any problem adding it.
Yes, I feel comfortable with that. It's not
Is that generally accurate? Do you have patients frequently who are on pain medications?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well then, with your approval, we'll add it. Should we use the exact language that's there, or should we change any part of it? Otherwise, in this document, we have used the term patient. Would you like to change clients to patients?
Yes.
Remember-
Just to be consistent?
Yeah.
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 I think so.
So it would read, children and adult patients who use pain medications or other medications are potentially vulnerable to someone who may wish to illegally sell or otherwise distribute drugs, or to enlist the aid of the patient in obtaining drugs for the licensee. Is that second part okay? About enlisting the aid of that person and getting drugs for you to sell to somebody else?
I think so. What do you
Yes.
guys think?
Yeah.
I go along with it.
Yep.
Okay. So with your, if you do vote at the end of this discussion to recommend approval of these criminal conviction guidelines, we would ask you to include that as an amendment to the document
Okay.
at number 3 under the drug dealer crimes. So then the other reasons there would shift down to become number 4 and number 5. And the last category in the guidelines is crimes involving being under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And aside from the general things about, you know, the patient population that's served and the physical proximity, we talked about licensees, when you're working with your patients, you often use dangerous instruments like knives or scalpels or other things that have blades. And so if you, the practitioner, are under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you could potentially create harm to a client in the process of doing that. So that was our thinking here. Are you generally in agreement with that concept?
Yes.
Okay. I see one more place where we need to make a correction under that category. In the first sentence, at the end of the sentence of number 1, we said client instead of patient, and elsewhere in the document we had changed that to patient, so I think this was just an oversight on our part. So that would be another amendment that I would request that you approve with your vote. That is everything that we as a group agreed to include in the criminal conviction guidelines. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Ultimately, I'm asking that you vote to recommend that these guidelines be approved by our commission.
I do,
Any other comments?
yeah, I have a comment.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't I? In our discussion, in our work group, if you go back to the fraud and deceptive trade practices category, one of the things that we discussed was if somebody's applying for a license in this state, either a practitioner or a facility, and you've got owners of that facility that are perhaps not practitioners, how could we determine if they had been involved in Medicare fraud in their past? And if they had, could we identify them and prevent them from opening a business in Texas? And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where I discovered that for that to happen, for you to be able to, for our group to be able to investigate them on a national Medicare fraud level, we'd have to have fingerprinting to be able to accomplish that. And to have fingerprinting, we'd have to have a change to our act. So, am I?
That's correct.
Am I stating that
To
correctly?
require specifically the fingerprinting in order to get the national level criminal background check, we would need authority for that in the statute.
So, I just wanted to put that out there as something that had been looked at, something that had been discussed, and I didn't realize that it would take a change on the level of our act for something like that to occur. And so I guess I'm curious as to the group sitting here, is that something that you all think we should look into, or is it something that you all think we should leave alone?
I think we ought to look into it.
I think it would be pretty difficult to change the act, but
But if it could be changed, would you be interested in investigating that?
it makes sense to me that we would.
And you're speaking, I do remember that discussion, and I have found my notes from that. You were speaking to the owners and the controlling persons of the facilities. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, they're my greater concern above the practitioners themselves.
Right.
In most cases, and not all, but in many cases, the practitioner is providing the care and is providing the information to the owner on what to bill, but perhaps doesn't have ultimate control in what goes out in the bill. And, and by bill, I mean charges to entities. So I would like to be able to hold the owners of the practice also responsible. Whoever name is on the claim that the charges then go to Medicare or a third-party payer is responsible, but I'd like to be able to reach to the owners of the business as well. And I'm interested in looking at the owners that are trying to open practices in Texas, just to make sure they don't have a history.
Christina, Mary Winston, I haven't looked at the statute today, but would that, and Laura may have some input, and I completely understand where you're going with this, would that require a statutory change, or is that something we can even accomplish in our rules to go? The owner isn't the licensed practitioner, but is that something?
But the facilities are
Yes.
licensed or registered. I'm not sure what the exact terminology is.
Licensed.
But,
Yes.
you know, in other statutes where we have licensed facilities, we have included as part of the application process that the applicants have to show us who the owners or controlling persons are. And then we have, if we have authority in the statute, you know, we have done criminal background checks on those people as well. My understanding is that to do the federal, the big fingerprint part though, we would need statutory authority for that.
Yes, okay, yeah, that's,
I wanted to ask if the board had any thoughts about whether you think that as part of the accreditation of the facility that you should impose a requirement that they background check all their employees, because not all the employees are licensees who are going to have a background check through, TDLR.
Makes sense to me.
That's a thought. You've got
If
quite a few
they have these
people.
crimes in their history and they're not a licensee and they're working there, then the exposure is
They
the
have
same,
to
so that's why I'm wondering if that's something.
On their own nickel.
Personally, for me, it makes sense.
Are we saying that every employee at every O&P company should have a criminal background check? Is that what?
That's,
Well,
I think that
if you
was
wanted to
the-
impose that as part of the accreditation, because that goes to the facility and any employee there, as opposed to who's licensed or not.
So who would determine whether or not I could hire a technician with a felony conviction?
Well, it can be left to the discretion as to who they hire, but if they're required to check them, then they'd at least be aware, and, most facilities are going to not want the liability or responsibility of hiring a felon if they have a doubt. So it's something to consider as part of the accreditation of the facility as opposed to the license of the people working there. I'm just tossing it out there, something to consider for the future.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. When I was a private owner, I opted personally to do a background check on every employee I hired. So it actually didn't occur to me that somebody wouldn't do that.
Ms. Mize, Mary Winston, is this something I can tell that this has been discussed in the work group, but do we need to discuss further in the work group, or do we think we can handle what we presented thus far and then move forward with the work group handling this specific issue before we present it to the whole board?
We don't have to resolve that question before we can act on the criminal conviction guidelines that are in front of us today, if that's what you're asking.
Yes. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Which that's what I'm thinking too, that this is definitely something to discuss further.
I just wanted to know if there was interest
Yeah.
in pursuing.
And it seems like there is, which I think, yeah, like you had mentioned, there's definitely a concern of the ownership of these facilities, and sometimes that's where some of our biggest concern comes into play.
Right.
And if there isn't any type of checks and balances, I guess you would say, maybe with that part of it, if we had any play in that, that would definitely be
Right.
a plus. So, yeah, definitely is something to discuss, and we'll look in further in the future, or as we move forward.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. All employees at most facilities have access to patient records, right? So, if somebody's got access, being not in the profession, in my business as part of a car dealership, we background check every employee that comes in the door because of having all the personal information
Right.
for everybody who buys a vehicle.
Right.
Thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
Yvonne's got a question.
Yvonne?
Having looked at a lot of facility accreditation forms, often the owner is a corporation.
Yvonne, we're not going to be able to catch that for everyone watching unless
Yeah, we
you
wanna
come
make
up to
sure
the
we get your
microphone.
comments, so.
Yvonne Feinleib, DSHS. Having looked at a lot of facility accreditation forms, the owner is often a corporation, so they may list the names of responsible parties or directors or whatever, but our application focuses on the practitioner in charge who actually signs the affirmations that the facility will operate legally and appropriately. I'm not sure what language you would require or that would be useful to fingerprint or background check the directors of a corporation, particularly if it's a very large out-of-state corporation. I'm not sure how you'll handle that, but that might be a work group topic to consider.
And while the work group, Mary Winston, is considering that, we're working on the strategic plan right now, internally and apparently externally. And one major thing that's being discussed is redundancies and impediments. So whatever we discuss, and if we haven't, Yvonne brought up a very good subject. We have corporations with directors who are, it's a foreign corporation, fingerprinting or background checking. We would have to look into that, the work group would, with the idea that we don't want to be a business impediment, but there are some issues that I can personally think of that we could move forward or not move forward with, but I'm not going to go into it because I definitely want the work group to sit down and hash that out. Ms. Mize, you brought up some very good points, all of you have, and it definitely sounds like something we need to further discuss. It sounds like everybody's pretty much in agreement on the other topics that Christina has gone over, and we've discovered something that we need to flesh out a little bit more.
Okay. So at this particular point then, do I hear a motion to approve what was discussed?
The criminal conviction guidelines.
Yeah, the
I make a
criminal
motion
conviction
to
guidelines.
recommend approval of the criminal conviction guidelines with the aforementioned amendments we discussed.
Thank you.
Do we need to state the amendments?
Kevin Matthews,
Can I state them for him?
Yes.
Under the category crimes involving the possession with intent to deliver, possession with intent to distribute, delivery, distribution, or manufacture of drugs, the amendment is to add a new reason number 3 that reads, children and adult patients who use pain medications or other medications are potentially vulnerable to someone who may wish to illegally sell or otherwise distribute drugs, or to enlist the aid of a patient in obtaining drugs for the licensee. The remaining 2 reasons currently listed as 3 and 4 would become 4 and 5. And then there's another one.
Correct. Yeah.
Are you ready? There's one more. Okay. Under the category crimes involving being under the influence of alcohol or drugs, under reason number 1, the first sentence, at the end of the sentence, medical service provider / client role, the word client should be changed to patient.
So Catherine Mize, I'd like to second.
Any discussion, any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All against? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you for all your hard work. At this particular point, I'd like to take a 10-minute break, and we will reconvene. I think we're pretty close to being done, but we'll take a break. Thanks. All right, I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
It was worth it. It was really worth it because I felt really confident. Yvonne, George.
Hit that gavel,
So,
Mr. Mohican.
so the meeting will be back, is back in order. It is 11:39, 11:34, according to this clock at least. The next agenda item is going to be G, and it's regarding the update from the work groups and any recommendations. I know this is early on, but obviously there's been some action. But the first one's going to be the enforcement work group, which was Kevin, Catherine, and Randy. It sounds like y'all have been doing some work. Any comments, suggestions, or anything?
Are we gonna set a next meeting with the next agenda?
Hi, Christina Kaiser again, Director of the Enforcement Division. What we forecast as being next on the agenda are two things primarily. One is a discussion about a topic that Ms. Mize raised earlier about the process for handling enforcement cases once the power is transferred over to TDLR, and specifically how we're going to utilize the expertise of expert witnesses, whether they're from the advisory board or otherwise. That'll be one topic that we want to spend some time on with the advisory board. As part of that, we will also want to take advantage of the work group members to participate in some training with our folks to start acquainting our investigators and lawyers with the industry. So we're hoping some of the work group members will be available for that. And then the other big topic on the horizon for the work group is development of a penalty matrix for this program. The penalty matrix is the policy document that determines the administrative penalty or license sanction that we pursue against somebody when we take enforcement action against them. That's what we have on the horizon.
Thank you very much.
Are we gonna set a date?
Not at this time. We need to let some other work kind of shuffle through with the folks that are handling the work groups before we set our next meeting. Probably within the next 6 weeks or so, you can look to hear from us.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next on the agenda is going to be the licensing work group, with myself, Sterling, and David.
I've looked over it, but I haven't.
Yeah, I said we didn't, I know we didn't get anything else. So no report on that for now.
Okay.
And
You all met?
we have not met.
And Mr. Mojica,
Yeah.
we want to say, and we all know, but for the record, that some things will be handled before other things. So it's a process, and the enforcement group working right now, we have one piece that's moving forward, we'll have another piece moving forward, and everything will sort of fall in line like dominoes. So even if we haven't met yet, we know that it's coming. So
Okay.
we're still on target.
All right, thanks. The next on the agenda is going to be Education Examination Work Group. That's myself, Randy, and Kevin. And we have not met with that group either.
Okay. No updates for that one as well. Sounds
Okay.
good.
No updates. And then the last group is going to be the Standard of Care Work Group, which was Catherine, David, and Sterling.
And we
Or
know
that
this
group.
one, Mary Winston again, is not meeting yet, because once we get all of our processes in line, we're not gonna move towards looking at standard of care until the program has actually 100% transferred. So that would be after the October 3rd date, which is 1st, but 3rd is the Monday. And by that time, we will be more ready to get into the standard of care with the work group members once we have our licensing, education, these different things that are more set up.
And George Ferry, again, the compliance division will be spearheading that effort, shall we say. So you'll be contacted by someone from compliance when we do our first meetings after October 3rd.
There's nothing else with that agenda item. We'll move to the next, which will be H, recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman, obviously we'll have staff reports, we'll have work group reports, and anything else y'all feel needs to be added to the agenda.
Okay.
including after today, too, obviously.
Okay. Anybody on the board think something needs to be put on at least at this particular point?
Would it be appropriate to have an agenda item to have an opportunity to discuss some of the ideas that were put forth in the meetings that were held?
The strategic plan meetings,
That one.
those, yes. Certainly, I think we can do that.
And since they just got posted today, people will have a chance to look at them and then maybe just have a placeholder to discuss them if it's warranted?
I believe we can do that. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Anything else? All right. We'll move forward to the agenda item I, discussion of date, time, and location of next board meeting. I think last time we had already set one tentatively.
Yes, sir, it's set for August 19th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And in light of the flight schedule, would you all like to change that to 10?
Yes.
It was easier for me. My flight didn't set down till 8:45, so.
Board agrees, we can make that change.
Yes.
Do we know if it's gonna rain then too?
August will probably be done.
Okay.
We'll
be
consult
done.
our weather modification
We're gonna be
program
locked
and
into
find
that
out.
heat already.
August and that.
We're gonna be praying for rain then.
I know.
No. Okay,
And
so
And
we're
can-
comfortable, go ahead.
Yeah, can we attempt to have the TBOP meeting for you up against that?
I think we've got it set already. I believe it's already,
Good.
the date's already set, as far as I know. So we have that taken care of. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn, I'd like to
Okay.
thank y'all again for being brave and getting here regardless of the inclement weather, so thank y'all for being here.
Sure. Thank you for all the hard work y'all are doing for us. We really appreciate it.
Kevin Matthews, I moved, we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
David Aaron's, I second.
All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Against, so moved.